Ever wonder what happens after the cameras stop rolling on your favorite movie or TV show?
Right. Like what goes into actually getting those finished masterpieces onto your screen?
It's a whole hidden world, and today we're going to pull back the curtain on a role that's absolutely crucial to making it all happen: the post-production supervisor.
Ooh, this is a good one.
You bet. You sent over some seriously intriguing excerpts from RoleCatcher.com.
Which, by the way, seems like an amazing resource. Have you used it before?
I haven't had the chance yet, but I'm adding it to my list. And from the sounds of it, you might be considering this as a career path. So let's dive right in. What really goes on in post-production?
Well, it's funny because it's this whole intricate world that most people never even think about, right?
Yeah.
You know, you get your popcorn, you watch the credits roll, but you rarely think about the army of talented individuals working behind the scenes to make it all come together.
It's like magic, but with more, software and late nights.
Definitely more late nights.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's this hidden magic, and at the center of it all is the post-production supervisor.
RoleCatcher describes them as the overseer of the entire post-production process.
Which is a pretty accurate way to put it.
Right, like imagine instead of cameras and lights, you're on this massive set, but it's all editing bays, sound studios, visual effects workstations.
It's a highly collaborative role, much more than people realize. The post-production supervisor acts as the central hub, working closely with everyone, and I mean everyone, from the director and producers to the editors, sound designers, and visual effects artists.
Wow, so almost like a conductor for the post-production symphony.
Exactly. They take all those individual pieces and make sure they harmonize into a cohesive and captivating final product. And they're responsible for every detail, every deadline.
And every potential pitfall along the way. Because let's be real, RoleCatcher doesn't sugarcoat it. This isn't a walk in the park, right?
Not at all. This is not your typical 9 to 5. We're talking long, often irregular hours, constant pressure to meet deadlines.
And you need the ability to navigate unexpected challenges, often with very little sleep.
You've got to have a cool head. There's this one anecdote from RoleCatcher that really stuck with me, where a major visual effects sequence just wasn't working as intended. Can you imagine the pressure?
Oh, I can only imagine.
The supervisor had to rally their team, brainstorm creative solutions, and manage a very, very tight deadline, all while making sure they didn't blow the budget. Talk about high stakes.
That is the definition of adaptability in action. It's one thing to say you're adaptable, but it's a whole other thing to be thrown into the fire like that and come out on top.
Exactly. And that's precisely why a successful post-production supervisor needs a unique blend of creative problem-solving technical expertise.
And exceptional people skills, because you're dealing with so many different personalities and creative visions.
You've got to be able to speak the language of both artists and technicians, all while keeping a firm grasp on the big picture.
And speaking of technical expertise, RoleCatcher dropped a pretty mind-blowing stat. The average post-production supervisor needs to be proficient in over 15 different software programs.
15, can you believe that?
It's mind-boggling. But then again, technology is evolving so rapidly in this field, it's almost necessary to be a tech whiz to keep up.
Absolutely. And we're not just talking about basic editing software here. We're talking about sophisticated programs for color correction, sound mixing, visual effects.
Even project management tools specifically designed for the complexities of post-production. It's a lot to keep track of.
It really is.
15 different software programs. That's wild. I mean, it sounds a bit daunting, but at the same time, for someone who's really drawn to this world, it's got to be part of the appeal, right? Like mastering these tools, this whole other language.
It's true. And honestly, you don't need to be a master of every single program right out of the gate. It's more about having a really solid foundation in the core tools.
And being willing to learn and adapt as new technologies emerge. Because, let's face it, things move fast in this industry.
They do. And it's only getting faster with AI and everything.
Speaking of, RoleCatcher highlighted a few key software examples. One that stood out to me was Avid Media Composer. I know it's industry standard for editing, but what makes it so essential for a post-production supervisor specifically?
Well, you have to think about it. The supervisor is ultimately responsible for the film's or the show's final cut, even if they aren't the ones actually editing it.
Right.
So they need to be able to speak the same language as the editors, understand how that timeline works, troubleshoot any technical issues that might come up.
So even if they're not the ones behind the controls, they need to understand how the machine works.
Exactly. And beyond the hardcore technical stuff, RoleCatcher really emphasized the importance of, what they call soft skills. Active listening, for instance, isn't just a nice to have in this role, it's crucial.
It makes sense. When you're coordinating so many moving parts, being able to really listen and understand the needs of your team, the director, the producers, everybody, that's got to be essential. But RoleCatcher takes it a step further, don't they? They talk about using active listening to anticipate problems before they even arise.
That's the mark of a truly exceptional post-production supervisor. They're not just reacting to problems as they pop up, they're proactively looking for those potential roadblocks, listening for those little cues that might suggest a bigger issue brewing.
Give me an example. What might that look like in a real-world scenario?
Sure. Let's say an editor is working on a particularly challenging scene, maybe one with complicated visual effects. The supervisor might notice the editor seems a little stressed, or they're working later than usual. Instead of just assuming everything's fine, they might casually check in, not in a micromanaging way, but just, with genuine curiosity.
Hey, how are things going? Anything I can help with?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And through that conversation, they might uncover a hidden technical issue, or maybe there's a creative difference of opinion that, if left unaddressed, could really derail the entire project.
And they're able to catch it early because they were paying attention, they were really listening.
Exactly. And that's where those soft skills become so crucial. Being able to mediate those conversations, find that common ground, and keep the project moving forward. So important.
Okay, so let's say someone listening to this is thinking, all right, this sounds amazing. How do I actually break into this field? What does a typical career trajectory look like according to RoleCatcher?
Well, it often starts with a lot of hustle. Entry-level positions, like a post-production assistant, that's a great way to get your foot in the door.
Right.
RoleCatcher really stresses the importance of building a strong work ethic, even if you're doing tasks that might seem, a little tedious at first.
It's about proving yourself, learning the ropes from the ground up. Like any good apprenticeship, you got to pay your dues.
Exactly. And you'll be exposed to every aspect of post-production, from logging footage to managing files to assisting editors. It's a masterclass in the practical side of the industry.
And from there, it seems like there's a pretty natural progression. Assistant to junior supervisor, then supervisor, and eventually, maybe even senior supervisor, leading larger teams, bigger projects.
You got it. And one of the most valuable pieces of advice that RoleCatcher gives is to seek out mentors along the way. Having someone who's been in your shoes, who can offer guidance and support, it can make all the difference.
Yeah, a mentor in any field can be a game changer, but especially in a field like this, someone who's been there, done that.
Absolutely.
Ah.
And speaking of getting ahead, RoleCatcher does not hold back on highlighting how their platform can give you a leg up in this crazy competitive field.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that really caught my eye was their whole interview prep section.
Oh, it's brilliant. Just imagine a database with thousands of potential interview questions specifically designed for post-production supervisor roles. No more going into those interviews feeling totally unprepared.
Yeah, that's huge. Being able to anticipate those questions beforehand, practice your answers, especially in such a high-pressure situation like a job interview, it can make or break you.
Oh, absolutely. And it goes even further than that. They actually analyze your CV.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, the AI system can actually see how well it aligns with specific job descriptions, and then it points out any gaps or areas for improvement.
Okay, I have to ask, because you mentioned AI, and we hear that term everywhere these days. What role is AI actually playing in the world of film and television production? Especially in post-production, is it a big factor?
Oh, it's huge, and it's changing so rapidly. I mean, we're already seeing AI-powered tools being used for stuff like automated subtitling, color correction, even some editing.
Wow.
It's not about replacing human creativity, though. It's more about, streamlining things, making those workflows smoother.
Right.
And it frees up the artists and technicians to focus on the really nuanced, more creative parts of their work.
Right. So it's like having this incredibly efficient assistant who can handle the more, technical and repetitive tasks. And then the humans get to really use their expertise where it matters.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. Although I imagine it also presents new challenges. Like, how do you, as a professional, how do you stay ahead of the curve when the technology is constantly changing like that?
It's a lifelong learning process, that's for sure. But the key is to stay curious, embrace those new tools and technologies, and don't be afraid to experiment, play around with them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And RoleCatcher definitely seems to echo that sentiment. Toward the end of the material you sent, they touch on a pretty fascinating development. The rise of virtual reality in post-production.
It's a game changer, there's no doubt about it. Imagine, instead of just watching footage on a screen, directors and editors can actually put on VR headsets and step directly into the scene.
Oh, wow.
Experience that world, fine-tune those camera angles, even manipulate virtual objects in real time.
That is some next-level immersive stuff. That sounds like it could completely revolutionize how films are made, how we even experience them. But how does that impact the role of the post-production supervisor then?
It's a great question, and honestly, even RoleCatcher leaves it open for discussion, because no one knows for sure.
Right.
It's really about being able to anticipate those changes and adapting your skills and your mindset. Will post-production supervisors need to become VR experts? Will they need to manage teams working entirely in these virtual spaces?
It's exciting and a little bit intimidating all at the same time.
Oh, definitely. But these are the exciting questions that we get to grapple with in the years to come.
So for anyone listening who's thinking about taking the leap, what would you say is the single most important piece of advice you'd give them?
Be a sponge. Absorb absolutely everything you can. Learn from everyone you meet. Be passionate, be persistent, and never, ever stop asking questions. This industry thrives on that. The world of post-production, it's constantly evolving, and honestly, that's what makes it such a rewarding and fascinating field to be a part of.
I love that. Such great advice. Well, it sounds like the world of post-production, it's full of challenges, it's full of rewards, sometimes in equal measure. But for those with the passion, the drive, the dedication, it can be an incredibly fulfilling path. And hey, to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has given you a clearer picture of what it takes to be a post-production supervisor. We want to hear from you. Head over to our social media pages. Let us know what resonated with you. Until next time, happy learning.